Welcome into the RotoWire Sports Betting Pod. Nick Whalen, John McKechnie here with you. We are talking NFL Divisional Weekend. John, extremely fun Super Wildcard Weekend. You know, I see why they attached the Super to the front of it. I think that was as memorable of a Wildcard Weekend as we've had in a couple of years. So we'll do a little bit of looking back on that. Obviously, we're recording this, Thursday late afternoon. So if you're listening to this show, you probably know what happened on Wildcard Weekend. You probably thought quite a bit about it, but we'll talk about the 4 games coming at us. We'll dig in on some Super Bowl odds as well. Anything else that piques our interest over at the Sportsbook. But good to be back with you, John. And where are your nerves at right now? I mean, there's nothing better than being the fan of the number 1 seed and just being able to sit back, take in Super Wildcard Weekend. Obviously, you might have some a matchup or two that you're hoping falls your way, but what a sigh of relief to have that 1 seed.
Yes, I mean it's definitely provided me some time to just relax, dating back to New Year's Eve. Really, that's the last time that I've been stressed about football, because that was the day that the Ravens took care of business against the Dolphins and locked up the 1 seed. So the following week, to score some karma points, I even watched the Ravens Steelers game with a Steelers fan. And just completely no trash talk. I'm just sitting there enjoying myself. Hey, look, you guys can win this game. You guys can get into the playoffs. Good for y'all. But now the nerves are set in, and I've been talking about it for weeks at this point, where I'm just scared to death of the football gods bestowing Joe Flacco back into Baltimore. But as last weekend's game unfolded, I thought to myself, oh, he also definitely could have had this game next weekend in Baltimore. So. Now Baltimore has CJ Stroud. The books hung the number at 9.5. I saw it go down in some spots to 8.5, and a lot of the money is still coming in on Houston. I think we're over 60% on Houston. I think it used to be a bit more, but it's back up to 9.5. So it's bounced around a little bit over the course of the week, settled in. I think that's where it's going to pretty much stay at this juncture. I don't think weather is going to be a big concern, but really, this comes down to CJ Stroud has already proven to be a good postseason quarterback. He looked phenomenal last week, just cool as a cucumber, and just really made it happen against a Browns team that I think in hindsight you can point to more flaws than what we were really looking at going into last weekend. But the Texans are also very healthy going into this game, whereas the Ravens. Marlon Humphrey's going to be out. That's a pretty big deal. Mark Andrews might be back, though, which, I don't expect it to be 100% Mark Andrews, but having another presence to help move the chains, I think, is pretty big for them. I am concerned about the running back personnel. I think they do matter in an offense like Baltimore's. Having to call Dalvin Cook up doesn't make you feel awesome. He had 2 fumbles this year on fewer than 70 carries. So, if the complaint about Melvin Gordon was the fumbles, Dalvin Cook might not be the guy that assuages them necessarily. But long answer short, I'm officially nervous, and 9.5 points. When you see that, your initial knee-jerk reaction is no, I think the Texans can hang in there.
I think so too. And I put up beating the book earlier today, and I did take the Texans plus 9.5. It's one of those games where I wouldn't say nothing would surprise me, because Houston going in and winning this game, that would surprise me. I will say that, especially if they do it in anywhere near as dominant fashion as last week. But Baltimore winning this game by 6, by 7, by 14, those all seem well within the realm of possibility. I don't see the Ravens losing this game straight up. But I will ask you, you join us every week on RotoWire Fantasy Sports Today, which you can hear 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Fantasy. And you told us, man, the matchup that I'm kind of scared of in round 2 would be the Cleveland Browns, a team that had already beaten the Ravens earlier this season. At the time, Joe Flacco on that heater. There had to be some Flacco going up against Baltimore, devil magic, if that matchup were to have occurred. But how do you feel now in retrospect that the Browns got completely housed by this Texans team? Do you still feel like the Browns were the worst matchup between the two for Baltimore?
I do. And I think, without taking credit away from what the Texans did last week, there were things that happened in that game that aren't necessarily sticky week to week, like multiple defensive touchdowns. you don't really expect that to happen. Kind of in the same way that 49ers fans were coping after the Ravens beat them on Christmas, where it's like, well, the Niners aren't going to turn the ball over 5 times every week. And it's like, well, it happened. You can't take that away. But like that is also true that you can't just go into a game banking on a team really just melting down on offense to that level. So I think Houston is, obviously like the story of the year at this point for them to come in with some of the longest Super Bowl odds, rookie quarterback, first time head coach, and to be in the divisional round and a lot of people picking them against the spread. I think it's a testament to what they've done there in Houston. But I think the roster still just lags behind. I think 1-53 or 1-22, however you want to scope it. I think Baltimore is the more talented side. I think the Humphrey issue is significant because Houston really only has like one true alpha pass catcher, I think, and that's Nico Collins. So the Ravens' lack of secondary personnel is a bit concerning in that regard at the cornerback spot. So we'll have to see what Mike McDonald dials up to kind of slow down Nico Collins, because if they slow down that connection between him and Stroud, I think it's going to be really tough sledding for Houston to get anything else going.
Yeah, Houston's been banged up all year, especially lately. And, now Noah Brown has joined Tank Dell on IR. So we're really officially down to Collins, Robert Woods, and John Mechie. And obviously that was enough last week. But I also don't think Baltimore is giving you back-to-back pick sixes and just going to decline to tackle Brevin Jordan on a 75-yard touchdown, right? So I think the way in which Houston beat Cleveland, you can't expect that kind of game 2 weeks in a row. I feel the same way about Green Bay going up against San Francisco. It's like Houston and the Packers almost played too well last week. It's like good luck replicating that against a more difficult opponent in the next round. So I do think Baltimore will end up being fine here. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being 27-20, that type of game. I do think Houston can hang around. And, what else can you really say about CJ Stroud? Like, I would love to say, man, he's down Tank Dell, he's down Noah Brown. They don't really have anybody else besides Collins. It didn't matter last week. It hasn't really mattered down the stretch when they needed to win games and they were down a bunch of key personnel. I mean, Stroud to me, like he looks like a 4th year, all pro type of player at this point. I don't think, he hasn't thrown an interception in how many weeks now? Like 5 or 6 games in a row. It's like, it's just
back
not even
to November 11th.
Right. Yeah. So more than that. The typical pitfalls that you would bring up, man, rookie quarterback, he's inexperienced. It's only his 2nd career playoff start. I don't even consider those things when I think about CJ Stroud. Like he's already advanced past that level.
No, he is truly something else. Just ice water in his veins. I mean, he played that way for the most part at Ohio State, and it was a pro-friendly offense that kind of got him ready for this maybe more than people would have expected. But I think there's also just the Stroud himself factor. I think that guy is just a cool customer, and he's insanely talented, extremely poised. He just is able to extend plays the right way, keep his eyes down the field, find the open guy. I mean, we saw a couple like wide open touchdowns last week, especially it was impressive early on where the game was still hanging in the balance and they're kind of going back and forth between him and Flacco, and Stroud's the one that didn't blink. Like Flacco and the Browns had some long plays, some touchdowns, and you're like, oh, the Browns could be in business here, but Stroud just kept it going and Flacco fell apart. So, I mean, and we're talking about Flacco, like a 38-year-old veteran with 10 postseason wins, 15 career postseason starts going into that game, and Stroud outdueled him. So, Stroud absolutely scares me. And one last personal note on this game. So we have had a date night scheduled for months for this exact Saturday. We're going to Cirque du Soleil in Atlanta, and I gotta say I wasn't stoked with the Saturday time slot.
What are you gonna do? What do you mean? What are you gonna do?
So what I'm gonna have to do is just hope that this is a blowout, but otherwise, I have had to fully mentally prepare myself to watch the first 3.5 quarters at home, and then just watch it on my phone on the way to Cirque du Soleil, and potentially have just an absolutely brutal evening or an absolutely jubilant evening, one or the other.
Will you be able to stream the game, or is this going to be, checking the box score situation?
I do have YouTube TV on my phone, so I will be able to watch it. But right. I could be in a foul mood potentially as I watch these guys fly through the air.
Man, I would not wish that on my worst enemy, man. If I had to sit at a Cirque du Soleil during a Jags playoff game, I mean, I thought you were going to say you had to cancel the date. I mean, the fact that you're going through with this, I think speaks to your character.
Well, in mentioning it, it became abundantly clear before I even got the full thought out that that wasn't a possibility for me.
Jeez, man. Well, thoughts and prayers. I'm emotionally shaken by this, John, and I can feel for you. But all right, to put a bow on Texans-Ravens, are we both on Texans 9.5? Are you taking the Ravens? Where are you going?
I think I will side with the Texans here. I think this is a touchdown game. I think we're looking at something like 24-17 Baltimore.
Okay, there we go. That would go under 43.5. That's the number I'm seeing at DraftKings. Packers-Niners is our night game on Saturday. Another 9.5 point spread. Both of these have sat there for much of the week. Total up at 50.5. That's our highest of the week right now. Just a hair above Bucs-Lions, which is 49.5. Brutal spot for the Packers. Obviously, they're playing with house money. The season's already a success. You got to get all those cliches out there. But your reward for knocking off the Dallas Cowboys, such as life as the 7th seed, is you got to go on the road at the 49ers. I think this game and the Houston-Baltimore game are parallel in some ways. Two teams that pulled off upsets that didn't really feel fluky, right? I mean, dominant upsets. Two of the more dominant upsets that we've seen in recent playoff history. But you're going up a level in competition, and Green Bay, man, I think you have to respect the offense. I still have big questions about the defense. This is 3 straight weeks where they've shown up to varying degrees, especially the Chicago and the Dallas game. Dallas ended up with like 500 some yards of total offense. That's a crock. That was garbage time. I know that game got a little tight toward the end. The Packers defense did exactly what it needed to do. Got a pick six, had a pick early in the game by Jair. That completely changed things as my ring light almost falls over. Big save there.
Catch.
Can the Packers defense do this again? That is the question. Can they exploit the 49ers in that way? Can you get after Brock Purdy to the point where he is rushed, where he's making the kind of just horrendous decisions that Dak Prescott was making? Like, credit to Green Bay for the way they schemed that defense. Also credit to Dak Prescott for, especially that savage pick. I mean, that was like a Will Levis throw. That was a Desmond Ridder throw, right? I mean, Darnell Savage took one step and he had nothing but, Green in front of him. 55-yard walk-in pick six. As many questions as we could throw out about Brock Purdy, he hasn't made many of those type of throws this season.
That's true. So you can't bank on that the same way, although the kind of common theme in the 49ers losses this year has been Purdy meltdowns and Purdy multi-interception games. He's, when they're humming and he's not turning the ball over, they are next to impossible to beat. But we've had a season's long and maybe longer worth of questions about the Packers defense and Joe Barry and all that, and yet of late they have played extremely well. So it does kind of make you reconsider that, and maybe these guys are tapping into a level that is more representative of what that defense looks like on paper, talent-wise, which is a good thing, of course. But they aren't going to get gifted the same things, kind of like what I was saying about the Texans. Purdy won't do anything that dumb. At least I don't think so. But even if he is like a little bit shaky in the early goings, and I don't think that we have reason to believe that he will necessarily, like, you still have Christian McCaffrey. Like, that's the thing about the 49ers is, like, if you take away one thing, the other thing can more than make up for it. So that's what concerns me there. Mario and I were talking on the fantasy pod earlier. Aaron Jones was obviously great last week. You do worry about the Packers' ability to kind of replicate that success on the ground against this 49ers run defense. And if that's the case, then it's all on Jordan Love. And if you're a Packers fan, you don't necessarily hate that at this point, but you still have to acknowledge that it's a pretty huge ask to say, all right, Jordan, like you're going into San Francisco, the number 1 seed, the best team in football, and you've got a hodgepodge of day 2 and day 3 first and second year guys to make it work. And that just probably is too much. I think the Packers hang around. I could see the Niners pulling away late. So I am kind of going back and forth on which side I'm taking here, but I don't think that the Packers run continues here. I think you might be muted.
I don't think so either. I think they'll put in a spirited effort. I certainly feel better about them hanging in with the 49ers now based on what we saw last week and even in the Chicago game than if you had asked me 3 weeks ago, hey, if these teams are playing in San Francisco, what's the final score? I would have said, like, I don't know, 49-17. But I think Green Bay, you mentioned they're doing this with such a kind of random collection of players where if you're not following the Packers closely, you're probably wondering, like, who is this Bo Melton character? Why is Dontavian Wicks dominating this game against the Dallas Cowboys? But I do think in some ways that almost makes them more difficult to defend, right? Like with a team like San Francisco, I mean, they have as many playmakers as anybody, but you kind of know who you got to stop, right? You got to find Brandon Ayuk. You got to find Deebo Samuel. Obviously, you do what you can to limit Christian McCaffrey. With the Packers, there's Aaron Jones, but then you don't know who's going to be the number one receiver, right? Like if somebody had told you the Packers are going to jump out to a 27-0 lead, they're going to hit a bunch of big plays, they're going to put up 48 points on the Cowboys, and Jaden Reed's going to have 0 receiving yards, and he's not going to even have a carry in that game. You would think that's insane, right? But Romeo Doubs was not really a big part of the game plan down the stretch. There was talk of, kind of where's he at long term? Did he take a step back? He becomes the number one guy in the Dallas game. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, those guys have given them plenty of good reps over the last few weeks as well. So I think the one thing you could say about the Packers offense is they've, in a roundabout way, become difficult to prepare for because you don't really know who's going to hurt you every single week. And all those guys are kind of on the same level where it feels like if their ability to generate wide open receivers, by the way, was a huge thing last week against Dallas. Like can you expect that? There were 3 or 4 times where Jordan Love was able to kind of drop back and then just loft one up and just, wasn't a great throw necessarily, but just make sure the receiver catches it because there's nobody within 10 yards of him. You can't guarantee that happens again. But again, when you have 6 or 7 guys that you kind of feel like are all equal threats in one way or another, I think that does make them difficult to defend. So I think the Packers will score. Do they get to 30? No, I don't think they do. The question is, do the Niners get to 30? Do they put up 33, 37? Because I do still think a Packers defensive collapse is on the table.
I do too. So it's going to be tough to hold up against that litany of playmakers over 4 quarters. I mean, McCaffrey, we assume that he's going to be back to 100%. Kittle, just like what we were saying, it's just you take something away and the other guy steps right up and hurts you in a different way. Like, we've seen Kittle get shut down in games where Deebo Samuel basically wins the game for them straight up. And Brandon Ayuk is, probably the best wide receiver too in the league as far as like where he falls on the depth chart. So it's really tough to slow them down and come up with a game plan that's complete enough to do that the right way. I think the pass rush is absolutely going to have to get home in this one. And that's, again, a big ask against a 49ers offensive line that is as good as it is. So I think that the Niners are among the two favorites, big favorites on Saturday. I think the Niners are more likely to cover. That's kind of where I end up landing on it.
I feel the same way. And, one thing I've said all year about the Niners is they don't have to play an A+ game to beat a good team like Green Bay by 2 scores. They have so many weapons and so many options that even if Green Bay does a good job slowing down Christian McCaffrey, it's like, well, good luck stopping all 3 of Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. On top of that, they have so many options where they've had plenty of games this year. Like the Arizona one is the one that always comes to mind. It's like they almost allowed 250 rushing yards to the Cardinals. Arizona's going up and down the field. I think we were on San Francisco in the Circa contest that week. They still find a way to win that game by, I think, 3 scores. You're just like, they didn't even feel like they played well. It's like they completely gassed that one away in the second half. And whenever they need to put a touchdown on the board, they can. I'm not buying that Green Bay could continue to hold up defensively. And, I think the number one thing they did to beat Dallas, other than hitting those, some big plays and of course the pick 6, was causing Dak Prescott to go into a panic midway through the first quarter. And it's really hard for me to imagine Green Bay getting off to that crazy of a start, right? Where the Cowboys immediately wilted. Like that was such a classic Cowboys collapse. I think any Cowboys fan would tell you, once we saw how those first few drives went for both teams, we kind of knew what was coming. Like I don't think the Niners would fall into that trap, even if Green Bay, marches down and scores on their first drive.
Yeah, they're not going to blink the way that the Cowboys did. Like CeeDee Lamb was yelling at Dak Prescott after the first drive, and he had gotten a target on 3rd down. So it's not like he wasn't getting fed. It's not like he had opportunities to get fed really at that juncture, and you could see the unraveling beginning. So Purdy is he's a cooler customer than Dak Prescott is already, and I absolutely trust him more in the postseason. So I think he'll keep things afloat, even if the Packers that opening script it is able to produce a touchdown or two.
Yeah, give me the Niners minus 9.5. Give me the over 50.5. And if you're looking for a prop for this game, I like George Kittle over 52.5 receiving yards. Packers 30th in the NFL in yards per target to tight ends this season. They've given up an NFL high 10 touchdowns to tight ends. Jake Ferguson obviously had a huge game last week. I don't think we see 3 touchdowns from George Kittle, but I think this should be a pretty good spot for him against a vulnerable defense. So Kittle over 52.5 receiving yards is my play there. All right, let's get to the Sunday slate, John. Hopefully you have no like Sunday morning Cirque du Soleil, anything going on?
I am like hard vetoing like having to do anything on Sunday, I think. So it can either be laying about because it's like a hedonistic glory or just like I can't get out of bed until like kickoff starts. But either way, yeah, we're the coast is clear as far as our Sunday football watching is concerned. So kicking it off with Detroit and Tampa, a nice little kind of lead back into things. And I thought both the games that these two teams played last weekend were a ton of fun. I thought that the Lions-Rams game was probably game of the weekend. That was amazing stuff. I loved when the Rams got the ball for their first possession. Tirico just didn't say anything. Just let the moment be what it was, and let how loud that crowd was be heard by the entire country. I thought that was sick. It was a crazy environment. Grown men crying at the end of that game. I mean, it had it all. It was a lot of fun. And then the Bucs, they stamped out the joyless Philadelphia Eagles, who had just become officially like a bummer over the last like month and a half. And it's like good. Like I couldn't be more neutral on an NFL team than I am the Buccaneers, but seeing them beat Philly like that I was pleased.
A bummer is the perfect way. That's the best way I've heard anybody describe the Eagles for the last 2 months. They're just a bummer. Like there's just no fun whatsoever. Nobody seems to be like, there's no urgency. Like that didn't feel like a playoff game for Philly at all. Like that to me felt like a week 18, like, whatever happens, we're good type of game. Other than the one long play to Devontae Smith, I don't think they had another play that went for more than 15 yards. Certainly they didn't through the air. I think Julio had the second longest pass play of the day. Swift might have had one long run, but there's nothing happening for Philly. It's like it was a 1-score game. They take the safety, and it felt like the game was over. And that made it I think a 10-point game or a 9-point game. And
something like that.
It just felt like the Eagles looked around and were like, well, that's it. I guess there's nothing we can do. This one's over. I'm like, there's plenty of time left. Like, what is going on here? And obviously it just got worse and worse as that game went along. The question is, what do we do with Tampa Bay? What do we take away from that? Like, because my thought is just, man, the Eagles are a bummer. Like anybody could have beaten them last week, it feels like. But Tampa Bay deserves credit for how dominant they were. I think the defense showed up in a way that we just weren't quite sure, especially against the pass. I thought that should have been a better spot for Philly, even without A.J. Brown. That's a Bucs defense that's just hemorrhaged pass yards all year. And now you're going to Detroit. I think we should be very clear that regardless of what happens here, either Baker Mayfield or the Detroit Lions are going to be playing with the Super Bowl on the line next week. That's just how it breaks down. I like Detroit here. I'm not even the biggest Lions backer. I've kind of been anti-Lions all year. I thought they were going to lose straight up to the Rams. I thought the Rams kind of blew a pretty big opportunity. I thought they were the better team last week. Had a few things that didn't go their way, but obviously didn't play well enough to win. And Detroit, skates by. They win that game by 1, and all of a sudden now you have like the best possible matchup you could ask for in the divisional round. So I like the Lions here. I think we get a relatively close game. I don't think it's a blowout, but I'll take Detroit with the 6.5.
Yeah, I'm with you on Detroit, where they're hard to trust. I was really hand wringing about which side I was going to be on last week. I ended up going the Lions route, and throughout the course of this week, I've been kind of riding high on what Tampa did. But, as we've talked a little bit more, and as I did some more prep for the show today, I'm a little bit less convinced. And to be fair, like the Lions secondary isn't great. Obviously, like the Eagles, they seem like they were more so like on quit watch, like in a playoff game of all times to do that. I mean, you let Trey Palmer just like weave his way through your defense. Like Trey Palmer's fast, but give me a break. Like he could have gotten stopped there. You're talking about a big shot play to David Moore, and then just kind of like David Moore, and then Baker Mayfield just kind of heat checking a like 20-yard touchdown to Chris Godwin to kind of like drive the final stake in. You're just like, oh my God. But if for all the problems that the Lions secondary has had over the course of the year, I don't think that they have that happen to them. And I think it was important to see just how lively that Detroit pass rush and Aiden Hutchinson especially were with the game on the line last week. So I think that Tampa Bay offensive line, other than Tristan Wirfs, could be in trouble here. And I think that Baker probably isn't still 100% mobility-wise. So that I think is a big factor at play here. And I think that the Bucs defense is solid, but I think that the Lions offense, especially at home, you have so many options, so many weapons. It's amazing that Sam Laporta is still playing. Amon-Ra St. Brown playing like a man possessed right now. Jahmyr Gibbs keeps coming on super strong, and David Montgomery is just kind of like this nice hammer to have in your back pocket to use when you need it. So there's a lot of ways. I mean, even Josh Reynolds was stepping up, I thought, a little bit. You won't have the revenge game narrative this time around, but I like the Lions here, and I think I like them a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's hard not to, man. And I'll be interested to see, how effectively can Detroit run the ball on what's been a very good Tampa Bay run defense for most of the season. Lions obviously way up there in terms of run frequency. It feels like every week, David Montgomery is carrying the ball 15 to 18 times. Gibbs, getting his 12 to 13 carries. I do wonder, if Tampa Bay steps up and stuffs David Montgomery early on, does Detroit get away from that? Do they keep pounding? Are they okay with a 16 carries for 54 yards type of day from David Montgomery just to kind of keep Tampa Bay honest? But I do think the Buccaneers secondary is exploitable. The Lions secondary is also exploitable, but not quite as exploitable. And I think if you turn this into a game where Tampa Bay won't be able to run the ball, which I don't think they will. We've seen Baker Mayfield come through a couple times this season. I think you're asking a lot for a guy who's never really come through in this kind of spot on the road with the NFC title game on the line. And it just doesn't really feel to me like the Buccaneers belong in this game. I think they caught a great matchup in the wild card round against Philly. And I think this might be a reminder of what it's like to play a team that actually cares about football and likes each other and likes its coach. And like you mentioned, it's going to be a wild environment, right? So I think this is a huge home field advantage for Detroit. The one thing with Tampa Bay, obviously they blitz a ton. Can they get after Jared Goff? I think the one thing I would worry about if I'm a Lions fan is, much like Dak Prescott, I think Jared Goff is susceptible to the occasional disaster game. And it's like if he goes out and throws a pick on the first drive, or he's sacked twice on the first two series, and all of a sudden it's 2nd and 21 instead of 2nd and 8. Then I could see the Lions pressing a little bit. When they went through somewhat of a rough period earlier, like kind of in the middle of the regular season, it felt like they were a team that when they were getting punched or when things weren't going their way, we talked about it on this show all the time. They were just randomly going for it on 4th down, trying to get it all back on one drive. So if you can get the Lions backpedaling, I think that's where the advantage could be for Tampa Bay. But I don't see the Buccaneers building enough of a lead where Detroit has to go into a panic.
No, like the film Old School, we don't need Frank the Tank coming back. Like that's with Goff. Like we don't need Goof coming back. When he turns into Goof, anything is possible. He has some of the wackiest, dare I say, zaniest looking turnovers. Sometimes like the empty hand, the ball's just like 10 yards behind him getting scooped up. Like he definitely needs to not do that. But I'm trusting that he'll keep it together. I think that the Lions meltdown comes next weekend. I feel strongly about that, regardless of who they play, whether the Niners or somehow the Packers. But this week, keep it on the level. I think that we get a friendly number here with this being 6.5. I think that there's a little bit of public optimism and having seen what you with your horse blinders on, you see the Buccaneers beat the Eagles, and objectively you might just be like, they beat the Eagles like that. They must be really good. I stopped short of that. The Action Network did bring up some good points on Baker and Tampa Bay. Baker, oddly enough, 3-0 against the spread in the postseason, 7-1 against the spread in his last 8 as an underdog. I think it's interesting also that 90% of the money seems to be coming in on the over in this one. I don't think the Bucs do their part. to get us there. So I think that the Lions would pretty much have to put up 35 in order for that one to come in. So I'm looking at this one, and I'm seeing Lions 30, Bucks 17.
Another good note that I dug up from the Action Network: teams that win as an underdog in the wild card round are 6-25 straight up, 14-17 ATS in the divisional round over the last 20 years. If you just take the last 13 seasons, or maybe 12 seasons, I don't know, going back to 2011, that's the point. Those teams are 1-17 straight up and 8-10 against the spread. So I don't think we can completely rule out Tampa Bay hanging around. Like, if this game was like, I don't know, 24-17, 23-17, I don't think that would shock you. But the numbers strongly suggest that these underdogs that win on wild card weekend really struggle to try to push to win straight up in the divisional. And I think, like you said, you look back at the Philly game and you're thinking, oh man, if they beat the Eagles, well, they should be able to hang in with Detroit. I think the fact that we saw Houston and Green Bay win as underdogs the way that they did, I think there's a little bit of underdog fever going on now, and we might be due for a correction this weekend.
That's where I'm landing with it. I think the Lions kind of got their proverbial monkey off their back, getting their first postseason win in basically our lifetimes, and I think that they will continue to get it done this weekend. It's next weekend that I'm really concerned about for the Lions. I don't view them as a Super Bowl team. They're like 9-1 right now. I'm not really touching that. Again, we have kind of long-standing trust issues with the Lions, but in this spot, I'm backing them.
By the way this is breaking down for San Francisco, man, I mean, you're down to the Final Four in the NFC, and it's Jordan Love in his first playoffs. It's Baker Mayfield in the Buccaneers, and it's Jared Goff in the Detroit Lions. Those are the teams potentially standing between you and the Super Bowl berth.
But yeah, that's why I'm pretty sure that the Niners are like minus money to win the NFC and make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and rightfully so. A couple props real quickly on this game. I like the under 44.5 rushing yards for Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, Tampa Bay, great against the run. They have been all year. I think this is a spot where Gibbs is involved. He makes his mark on the game. I think it's as a pass catcher. I think if they're going to pound the run or attempt to against Tampa Bay, it's with David Montgomery. So conversely, I actually like the over on 14 carries for David Montgomery. He had exactly 14 last week. Wasn't super effective. You can see that similar script playing out this week. But the Lions continue to run him, and they also ran a season-low 55 plays last week. I mean, they're averaging closer to 68 to 70 plays on the year. When they played Tampa Bay back in Week 6, they ran 69 offensive plays. So I think we get higher volume. That could be 2-3 more series, depending on how long they go for Detroit. If they inch closer to their average in terms of total plays. And obviously, I think there's some trickle down there for David Montgomery. All right, John, that brings us to Sunday night. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we get Chiefs-Bills in the Sunday night window. Bills 2.5-point favorites at home. 45.5 is the total. This is the matchup that we thought we would get, that we almost knew we would get at some point in the AFC postseason. The path that both of these teams took to get here, not at all what we expected. It's been a complete roller coaster season for Buffalo. There were several points at which it looked like they might not even make the postseason. The thought of them winning the division 5 weeks ago seemed insane. But here we are. They end up as the 2. Kansas City wins their division. They end up as the 3. This is a ultra difficult game for me to evaluate. And it's interesting because I think if both of these teams had lived up to the type of team we thought they would be all season, it would be an equally tough game. But the fact that we don't know what version to expect of either team makes it even tougher.
Yes. I mean, this is different than 2 playoffs ago where you would say these are 2 teams at the absolute peak of their powers. And that game delivered probably the most memorable postseason game of the last decade plus. I mean, one of the best ones ever. I feel like every time that we're in Vegas and, that time of year, July, there's not a lot of live sports going on at 3 a.m. Pacific time. So that game's almost always on the replay. And I always forget just how insane the last 2 minutes plus overtime in that game were. But I digress. For as far as this game goes, I felt like the Chiefs are here as it pertains to getting past last weekend because the Dolphins didn't want to be here. I think that the Dolphins and the Eagles had a similar crappy attitude, and it would have been completely all on the Chiefs if they found a way to lose that game last week. And the Dolphins really wanted no part of that. So I only give the Chiefs really partial credit here. I don't take away much from like the big storyline of this being Patrick Mahomes' first road playoff game. I think he's nails. He's got alligator blood. Like, I don't think he's going to be rattled in this situation. But I do think that the season-long problem with the Chiefs that is, quite literally impossible to solve in season, especially once you get past the trade deadline, is they don't have the horses. Travis Kelce is clearly slowing down. Rashee Rice, for as good as he is, he can't be like the only guy carrying your offense. And so like you take these shots to keep the defense honest to Mecole Hardman, but those don't seem to be landing. Your alternative is doing a shot to MVS. That's not a great option either. I know that the Bills are a little bit banged up in that linebacking core, so maybe Pacheco, especially with this game being in cold conditions, like that could be a factor here. That was certainly a huge factor in the Bills' postseason loss a year ago at home in this very same weekend. So that's all in play, but I think Josh Allen is the scariest quarterback on the planet right now. I know that the turnovers are they are what they are with Josh Allen, but I think at the same time, like, he's a guy that can will the team to win. Like, if the passing game isn't clicking, if the run game isn't doing it, he's just going to do it himself. And he's so effective as a runner. He's such like a bull in a china shop going down the field. I mean, I think that he alone, is gonna have his moment in this game, and the Bills, for all their warts, they're going to be in the AFC Championship game.
I don't think the Bills have necessarily fixed themselves. And I think injuries are a big part of it, but I feel more confident that they're back on track than I do Kansas City. And I think you're totally right. We got a little bit of a false flag last week because Miami just wasn't ready for that. Tua wasn't ready. It was a bad spot for them weather-wise. I think we talked about not wanting to overvalue that aspect of it. Tua looked like a guy who was very cold the entire game. And I think that turned into a really advantageous spot for Kansas City. And, the weather's not going to be like horrendous in Buffalo, but it's still a pretty huge home field advantage. I think I'm with you. I don't expect Patrick Mahomes to wilt because he's all of a sudden on the road in a playoff game. Like, it's Patrick Mahomes. I think he's going to be just fine. But I think Mahomes can be himself and, play like his usual best player in the world, self. But I just, like you said, they neither have the Jimmies nor the Joes, John, on that offense. And I think it was papered over a little bit because they were in such a favorable spot against a banged up Miami team. The injuries on the Buffalo side do worry me because, the way our guy Jim Coventry described it on the show this week was they're going to have trouble fielding an NFL defense. That worries me because Jim knows these guys better than I do. He knows like the third linebacker for the Buffalo Bills.
AJ Klein.
Shout out to Jim, man. The most prepared man in the industry by a mile. They could be without 2 or 3 starting linebackers. They could be without 2 or 3 starting D-backs. Rasul Douglas didn't play last week. Obviously, Milano, Trey White, those guys are already on IR. Von Miller's banged up. I do think all things equal, the Bills win this game. There is a world here in which they're so banged up on defense that it's convoluted. They're missing assignments, and the Chiefs are able to kind of squeak their way by here. But I don't know. I'm on Buffalo. That's where I went in beating the book. I think the Bills. I even went as specific as to say the Bills win this on a last-second field goal. That would seem very fitting for how these teams in this game would go.
It would. It's going to come down to the wire. There's a reason why this one is -2.5. I am on the Bills. Once we get to the parlays, I'm kind of staying against the Bills on the spread and just going more the money line route. But I do. Tyler Bass needs to not yank it. Like that one. Was it an extra point attempt or a field goal? Was it a field goal late in the game against the Steelers this past week? That kick
blocked.
It just had no prayer. I don't think it was blocked, or maybe it was, but
it had one blocked and it bounced like 40 yards the other way. It was like the longest. It must have hit so square on somebody's palm.
I remember one just going due left, and that didn't look great. So maybe he needs the second eye black. I'm not sure, but either way,
I was locked in a battle with the local cable company during that game, so I was like struggling to stream it on my phone. I'm not going to get into details here, but wasn't thrilled with how that one broke down. So I wasn't as locked in on Tyler Bass's every kick as I normally would be.
Right. I know you as the T Bass expert generally. Yep. So, but yeah, I get it. The cable company, they pulled that stunt at the beginning of the college football season where everyone had Spectrum that tried to turn into ESPN right at 8:00 Eastern. They're like, we don't have this anymore. Sorry.
Psych. Gotcha. All right, so let's close the book here. Let's make an official pick on this game. I think I'm yet, you and I listen to a ton. We read a ton throughout the week. I'm yet to read one thing or listen to one thing where I'm like, yes, that is the way. I agree. Like nothing would surprise me in this game. I think it's going to be close. That I will guarantee. I think this is a close game. I don't see either team running away. I would be shocked if this is more than 13 points one way or the other, and that would require some kind of wonkiness on one side or the other. But I'm going Buffalo. I think 2.5. If you like the Bills, it's fine. Some people would say just take the points in a game that's this close. Maybe Rams Lions would be the illustrator on that one. But if I'm taking the Bills to win, I think they can do it by at least a field goal.
I like it. I'm on the Bills against the spread here as well. And I think if this one does kind of turn into a blowout, I think it's in Buffalo's favor. I don't think the Chiefs have that in them right now. All
right. Well, let's go to the parlays of the week, John. I'll get my just wuss parlay out before you drop like a 40-to-1er on us. We're taking the Niners minus 9.5. We're taking the Lions minus 6.5, and we're taking the over 50.5 in Packers Niners. That gets you to almost 6-1 at DK.
I like that. That will certainly play. And like you said, your boilerplate 6-1, but that will work. Last week, the almost 25-1, 4 legs of it came in. We were so close to podcasting from a yacht, but oh well. So I'll start with this one. We'll kind of ease in. This one's just 8-1. Baltimore money line, San Francisco minus 9.5. Detroit alternate spread up to 8.5, minus 8.5. That pays out plus 129. And the Buffalo money line, that will get you to plus 812. The bigger parlay, this one's a little bit over 20-1. Baltimore against the spread, minus 9.5. San Francisco minus 9.5. We got Detroit minus 6.5. We've got the under in that game as well, under 49.5 in Tampa Bay versus Detroit. We also have the Buffalo money line that pays out plus 21.44.
Okay. I like that one a lot. Could you do a quick recap on that if you still have it up? Just real quick, what the 5 legs were?
I do. The 5 legs are Baltimore minus 9.5, San Francisco minus 9.5, Detroit minus 6.5, under 49.5 in Tampa Bay and Detroit, and Buffalo money line that pays out plus 21.44.
Tell me where it loses. I don't think it does. I don't think it does. So the Tampa Bay Detroit total, that is a fear that Tampa Bay doesn't hold up its end of the bargain.
Correct. That is completely it. I think that those shot plays kind of run out. It's not to say that I think the Bucs are going to turn into what they were in Week 18 against the Panthers and score 9 points or anything like that. But they got their playoff win. I think that things maybe don't break their way quite the same against a motivated Detroit team at home. I think that Philly was full quit watch. Again, not taking away too much. I know it sounds like I am, but I respect the Bucs, but I think their journey ends here.
All right. I love it. John. You can go check out my full write-ups on all these games over at Beating the Book. You can find that at rotowire.com/football. John, when is your next pod with Mario?
We will keep those rolling. We keep them rolling all year long. So we record those on Thursdays. I believe today's should be up already. I think that will be hitting podcast feeds any minute. It's already uploaded into the podcast Overlord servers and should be disseminated as such. So that's an hour and a half or so of on 4 games plus a little bit of postmortems on the Dolphins and the Eagles. We really pick the carcasses on those two.
All right. We love it. John, always great breaking down these games with you. Best of luck to you. Best of luck to me as well. I'm going to need it. Had a rough wild card weekend. Best of luck to everybody listening. Get those bets in. Let us know how you do on Twitter. If you want to tail us, if you want to go against us, you're welcome to do either. We got to get a special John McKechnie parlay on DraftKings. We got to get on the horn with them, some sort of boosted sicko McKechnie parlay each week.
Look, I'm listening. I think the sales pitch needs to be made. I just needed a bit more backing from a more legitimate source such as yourself. So now we got the horses to make this happen, I think.